everyone, back tuning into today's first video. So we're going to have a look at weather next week to 10 days in today's video. It's going to take us to around the 18th of January. So we're going to go into the second half of the month with this update. We're going to have a bit of a cold snap coming up at the end of the week and weekend. It's not the big freeze that's engulfing many parts of Europe. I have to emphasise that. It's going to be an Atlantic-driven cold snap. So there will be snow around, and we're going to do snow watch this evening, I think, having our first sort of detailed look at the snow potential for the end of the week. There will be snow around, but we're not talking about a severe Siberian freeze such as they're having across many parts of, or have had over many parts of Europe, and I continue to have down in the southeast of Europe. So I'll get on with the first video in a moment. We're going to sort of extend beyond the cold snap. There's a lot of uncertainty about what's happening as we get beyond the cold snap. So the cold snap goes in Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then beyond that, do we keep it cold or do we revert to a milder scenario? And that's what today's video, or first video, will be focusing on. Before I get on with that, just say about the ads. This link to articles on the page. If you have a browse, you can click through links, helping us page website. Thanks very much for doing that. So we'll start off very quickly with Central England temperature. For the first week of January, we stand at 4.3. It's an anomaly of around a degree above average, and that's provisional up to yesterday, the 8th of January. So we've gone milder than average. It was a fairly chilly first week through most of it, but the last couple of days have been very mild, particularly yesterday, and that's lifted us up to around a degree milder than average. So these are the 500 millibar height anomaly charts for next week to 10 days. We've got the ECMWF here on the top. The GFS, we'll have a look at that in a moment, is on the bottom. 500 millibars, 80,000 feet is an area in the atmosphere. High pressure and low pressure being moved around by jet stream running above. Red extrapolates to high pressure, and blue extrapolates to low pressure. So we see that we've got quite a big ridge here extending down towards the UK from the northeast with the ECMWF. That's a fairly big blocking feature actually, but sitting to the north of Scandinavia and going up towards the North Pole. Then we've got this cold trough, which is still the legacy of the big freeze, really, that's going on into central and eastern parts of Europe. Another trough is extending down through the middle part of the Atlantic. We're under this weak ridge just here, so we're not really in a cold or a mild air mass with this, although the ridge does extend back towards this blocking feature. So if anything, we are probably on the colder side of the blocking feature, but the real cold is still through central parts of Europe. Nevertheless, under this ridge, we will certainly be getting frost and fog, and it isn't Atlantic driven. So after the cold snap, it looks like the ECMWF wants to keep things generally cold and dry and frosty. The GFS is different, however. That is placing a ridge more or less to the south and southeast of us down here, which leaves us in an Atlantic-driven pattern. We've still got this trough in the Atlantic, but the jet stream is doing something like that. So it's placing us on the mild side of the jet, and we're bringing an Atlantic influence there. So very quickly, the GFS wants to break down the cold snap as early as Saturday and revert us back to a milder pattern, whereas the ECMWF is much more prolonged. So not with particularly snowy weather, but much more prolonged with cold, dry and frosty conditions. So you can see this on the GFS temperature and precipitation ensembles for the next couple of weeks. The red line here is the 30-year temperature average in terms of the upper air temperatures. We're a bit milder than average right now. There's our cold snap coming up at the end of the week and into the weekend. Doesn't look like a very prolonged cold snap at all, but this is the period of uncertainty just here. You see there are several members of the GFS ensembles that are going milder than average, including the operational run of the GFS. So the charts I show in a moment are going to be reflective of a very quick breakdown of this cold snap and reverted to the Atlantic weather. But you'll notice there are several members of the GFS ensembles through this part that are keeping the cold going, and maybe even deepening it a little bit in one or two examples, which are probably bringing in easterlies as we get through into the second half of the month. So with such a split in the GFS ensembles so early in the ensembles, very difficult to say actually where this goes from around Saturday onwards. A huge degree of uncertainty. It certainly looks pretty dry. There's the precipitation spikes associated with this return to milder conditions on Saturday. These are probably wintry showers, bands of wintry showers coming through with this cold snap. And then after that, a lot of dry weather until we get to latter stages of the month when it's turning wetter again. But we won't worry about that because we've got so much uncertainty in this part of the chart. And of course, anything else has a big question mark against it. So the temperature anomaly for the next week, despite the cold snap, is actually coming out a little bit milder than average. This is going from the 9th through to the 17th of January. And that's because this is based on the GFS model. And so that's because the GFS is seeing a very quick breakdown of the cold weather. Overall for the week, this is coming out a little bit milder than average. But if we was to extend this cold weather beyond Saturday, then obviously this would be a lot colder. Notice many east and southeast parts of Europe still looking very cold for the week ahead. Precipitation anomaly is looking like this next week. It's a bit wetter than average in the north, a bit drier than average in the south. Overall, not a great deviation. It does look a little bit more unsettled across generally western parts of Europe compared to what we've had in recent weeks. So both Spain and Portugal still looking very dry down there. I can just show you what's happening in America, by the way, because at the moment it's very cold across America, but there is milder weather coming to them. So in the next week, from the 9th through the 17th of January, the anomalies look like this, significantly colder than average in the northwest, but turning significantly milder than average in the east and the south of the United States. So this is the GFS for Thursday, and this is when we get our first push of cold air. Well, it'll begin on Wednesday, but the real cold air begins to push through from the northwest on Thursday. Tightly packed ice bars, it'll be windy, and those winds will be bringing in certainly wintry showers and probably snow showers to Scotland. We'll have a look at the snow potential for the first time with this situation. Have a look at that with Snowwatch tonight. We go through to Friday. The wind turns into the north. That is probably bringing snow showers into northern eastern parts of the country in particular. And then this is when the uncertainty is coming in from Saturday, which is relatively early on, really. It's not that many days away. But we've got this trough coming in from the west. That's coming into cold air, so it's bringing a band of rain, which might turn to snow as it hits the cold air, especially so in the north. But very quickly, the GFS is just pushing that through. And then you see the ice bars going back to west and southwest. And so it's turning significantly milder. Notice the heights never really falling across Spain. That's why it's just a little cold snap rather than anything more prolonged. You've got to get high pressure out of Spain, really, to get, for the northwest of Europe, to get sustained cold weather. So we go through into the early part of next week, and we're in a southwesterly flow in a week's time, Monday 16th of January. That looks mild and unsettled. And then these very mild conditions take us through up to day 10, which is Thursday 19th of January. Notice again, we're pulling the air up from a very long way south, so that looks exceptionally mild, actually, as we go up towards day 10. Probably quite a bit of rain in the north, but mostly dry down in the south. In the south, there could be a little bit of frost and fog close to the ridge of high pressure, but it is generally a mild to very mild airstream that's pumping up on the northern side of this ridge of high pressure sitting over central parts of Europe. This is the GEM, the Canadian model. And again, for Thursday, we're bringing in this swipe of cold air from the northwest. Then the winds go northerly on Friday. That's going to bring snow showers into northern parts of the country and down the east coast probably. Keep an eye on this area of low pressure just here around Iceland. This is the one on Saturday that the GFS wants to run through like that. Just turn the winds very quickly into the southwest. But GEM is doing something a bit different with that. It's moving it northwest to southeast across the country. So on Sunday at midnight on Sunday, that low pressure is off the East Anglian coast. Because it's come that way, on the northern and eastern side of that low pressure, there could well be a bit of a snow event taking place with that. And as it's clearing away, you notice the winds going back into the north rather than the southwest. Southwesterly map you see with the GFS. So by a week's time, Monday 16th of January, the winds are still generally in from the north. No mild air has penetrated through. The mild air is still out here to the north and west of the country, and all of this area is still cold. So although the ridge is building in, it is settling down, it is still cold. There'll be some hard overnight frost with that. And then as we go up towards day 10, well, look, high pressure just continues to dominate across the country. It's further north than the GFS has it. So this is how we end up on day 10 with the GM. Thursday, 19th of January, high pressure dominates, but this is still cold. Nothing has happened to break the Atlantic through, to bring the mild air back in. So this would be very cold, I would assume, with a lot of frost and fog. Particularly, it would be dry, wouldn't be much snow, but it would certainly be very cold and frosty, and maybe dense fog as well. Excuse me. And then the ECWF looking like this. Again, for Thursday, bring down that northwesterly. That's our first push of cold air. The winds go northerly on Friday, following isobars back. The air is coming from a very long way north, up here somewhere. So that is a proper Arctic northerly coming down across the country on Friday. Looks very cold. Saturday still looking cold. There's no real low pressure close to Iceland with this. We haven't got a little trough just here, but again, not really much of an area of low pressure, unlike what the GFS wants to develop and bring that mild weather back to us. So for Saturday we're still cold, and for Sunday we're still cold. I think we probably are bringing a trough down here on Sunday. There's a little kink in the isobars that you may notice. So there's probably a little trough coming down in the flow, which could be bringing sort of an enhanced risk of sleet or snow. But the main thing is that it's still cold. Wind is still in from the north. The mild air with the Atlantic is still out here. So still cold on Sunday, and still cold even into Monday as well. So the GFS does look a little bit isolated at the moment in terms of bringing mild weather back in as quickly as Saturday, I think. On Monday, the ECWF has this little trough just off the East Anglian coast, so that could be bringing something wintry down in towards the southeast. This is still all cold underneath this ridge. Cold conditions continuing to Tuesday as well. So about 5 or 6 days there of pretty cold weather. It's not until Wednesday the 18th that we start to break the Atlantic through. As this ridge begins to slip into Central Europe, here comes the proper mild push of air from off the Atlantic. And then that continues up towards day 10. That's a very long way out, of course. And what is that? So the GFS wants to bring that mild air in on Saturday. The ECWF says we bring it in on Wednesday. So for several days, it is significantly colder, the ECWF today, than we see with the GFS. ECWF ensembles finally be suffered to built in Holland. And you see the operational run of the ECWF, which we were just looking at, generally quite well supported in terms of this idea of having several days of quite cold weather from the end of the week into the middle of next week, certainly for De Built in Holland anyway. So it looks fairly well supported, but this cold weather probably will continue into the weekend and possibly even into the start of next week. The snow risk diminishes as that ridge builds in, but it is likely to be a cold ridge producing frost and fog. So I would say the idea from the GFS, this is just a steamroller through the Atlantic on Saturday. Have us in a balmy southwesterly flow as quickly as Saturday, or as early as Saturday night, is probably a bit over the top. And I wouldn't be surprised if the GFS starts to edge colder over the next day or so. It'll be interesting to see which way this plays out. We're certainly getting the cold snap on Thursday and Friday. Anyway, and that will bring a risk of snow, particularly to northern parts of the country, but don't rule out the chance of something a bit wintry elsewhere. And we'll pick up that particular part of the story with Snow Watch this evening, probably around 7 o'clock. Right, that's all for now. Thanks for watching.